Welcome to Open at the Top. I'm Reverend Greg Dorst, and this is the Open at the Top service. So I know that there are going to be some people who will be joining us as we move along. I don't want to miss anybody stepping in here virtually. So we'll just talk about some things until we get some more people going. This is what we call the Open at the Top, and what Open at the Top means is that we are always open to new ideas. And this, in fact, too, is a new idea, isn't it, Jackie?
Yep, it is.
This service is a new idea. It was brought to us by a pandemic, but it's a new idea, and we want this to be seen as a new idea. This is going to be filled with some new things. You know, this is kind of stripped down because we haven't got a church here, and we think that's a good thing. What we've got is a way to meet eye to eye, thought to thought, heart to heart, in a way that makes sense. And this is kind of a special time for us to be open at the top. You know, it's a difficult time filled with blessings. I mean, there are things that we can learn about how we live. There are things that we can learn about ourselves. There are things we can learn about our friends during this period of time. And there are things we can learn about being a friend or being a family member. And sometimes that means just reaching out and getting in touch with other people, the people that we love, as often as we can. So I know that a lot of people have joined us. Those people I truly love. I see some of the hearts coming up on the screen, and I'm really, really happy that you've made it. So I'm going to stand up and get close to you here and do a quick opening treatment, which is just an affirmative prayer. And I'm going to ask that we take a deep breath and release it one more time. And know that God is present right here in our space, this space between you and me, right here in this space in your living room or my living room, right here in this space no matter where you are, because God is present in its fullness everywhere. And I know that I'm one with that presence. I know that I'm one with that source of power, with that energy, with that magnificence. I am so much one with that, and so are each of you, that you cannot be separated, for you are simply made of God's stuff. For God simply makes things out of itself, no matter what it is, whether it's an expression that looks like a human being or a beautiful animal or a beautiful sight, the mountains, the desert, the trees, whatever it is that you see is made of God's stuff. God simply made it out of itself. And so I know that we're here on high purpose and that we move forward, keeping in our hearts the holiness of the moment, the nowness of this beautiful present time. And so we hear what we need to hear. We are able to communicate what we need to communicate, understand what we need to understand, and move forward with the greatest faith. In clarity, focus, ease, and grace, I release this with great thanksgiving for each and every one of you and for the teaching that I'm about to lay before you, which is something that you've heard before, but maybe not in this way. I'm so thankful for this. I release these words into the law of mind, knowing that they're already done. Please join me by saying, and so it is.
So it is.
Thank you, Jackie. So Jackie is the entire staff today. Oh, except for Harley. Where's Harley?
He's behind you.
Harley's behind me. And, you know, I plan on doing a song that I wrote tonight, and he might just join in.
He might bark.
Yeah, he might bark. He likes to bark when I sing and play the guitar, so if he barks, that's fine. I just hope he can stay on key this time. So, you know, this is a real mashup of special dates, because today is Passover, and Passover is a magnificent celebration. You know, it's the celebration of the triumph of the Israelites over slavery, the slavery that was brought about by the Egyptians back 3,000 plus years ago. And in this day, or this time of Passover, this is the first day of Passover, but Passover lasts just about a week, a little bit longer than a week. And we're celebrating this time of release from bondage. We're also celebrating, if we can celebrate it, the Good Friday experience, or the transition of Jesus, which happened on the Friday before Easter Sunday. And we're celebrating Easter Sunday in this service too, because I won't be with you on Sunday. So that's a big mashup of stuff, huh? We got Passover and Good Friday and we got Easter Sunday, and we're going to talk about all of those things in a really interesting and unique way. But first I want to talk about Passover, because Ernest Holmes really enjoyed this Passover experience. In fact, one of his favorite stories comes from a friend of his who really enjoyed that Passover story too. And he relays this story in one of his books, and it goes like this. He says he was at a friend's house looking through his art collection and noticed that there was a blank canvas up on the wall of this man's house. And so Ernest came over to the canvas, got real close to it, and called his friend over and said, so tell me, what is this? And the friend says, oh, that's my favorite painting. That's a fabulous depiction of the Israelites fleeing the Egyptians. They're right there on the edge of the Red Sea, and they're about ready to cross. And Ernest looks at him and says, okay, so where's the Red Sea? And he says, well, the Red Sea's already parted. And Ernest looks at him and says, oh, so that's why I can't see it. He says, well, where are the Israelites? Oh, they've already gone through. And as Ernest looks at this blank canvas, he asks his last question and says, all right. Now, where are the Egyptians? Oh, they're not there yet. And so there's plenty of laughter going on here.
You're not there yet.
And I love that. I love that story, because what it is that while I'm telling it, I know that you were envisioning the Red Sea, and you were envisioning the Israelites, and you were envisioning the Egyptians, even though they weren't there, just as they weren't there on the canvas when Ernest Holmes was taking a look at that person's favorite. So Passover, yeah, it's a really interesting experience, and it's a celebration, and we like that. This is a time of celebration. So we also have Good Friday, and I have written a song about Good Friday, and if Pedro is on today, this is the song that Pedro put the music to when I did a Good Friday celebration at the Sanctuary for Spiritual Living, and he played and I sang and we did this song, but Pedro's not here today. So I'm going to throw it together a little bit on the guitar and we'll see how that goes. But Good Friday is an interesting time, and it's a time where some people believe weeping is in order, where some people believe hard feelings and resentments are over because are necessary because the Savior was killed on that day, and there are some that believe that it is really just a magnificent transfiguration or transformative experience that needs to be told again and again and again so we can relate it to our own lives in a way that really makes sense. So I'm of the latter. I'm in the second camp, because I think that it really is the beginning of a transformative experience that we can understand at any level, and the more we dig into it, the deeper it gets for us. So I might get a little bit deep tonight, because this story of the Easter story itself, the Easter story is called the resurrection, and I love the term resurrection. It means a lot to me. That resurrection story is told in all of the four Gospels. And in Mark, the resurrection story is very, very simple. It ends when the tomb is opened up and it's empty. It says the tomb was empty. And I think that's a really powerful way to put it. The body was supposed to be in there, but the tomb was empty. Now, it differs from the other Gospels that go into more detail about what happened after that. But the one Gospel that is really interesting in its telling is Matthew. And it starts off with Jesus was crucified. And that's a powerful statement. Jesus was crucified. This is the resurrection story. You have to take a look at what crucifixion was back then and understand the depth of what that was about. I mean, it was reserved for the most treacherous of people. It was reserved for those people that had committed the most heinous crimes, that were the enemies of the state and the people. And crucifixion was a big, big deal. I mean, it's like today, if somebody said, yeah, John Smith was sent to the electric chair, that'd be a big deal. And you'd wonder what the backstory was on that, because the backstory is really important. And it should be important in determining for us why Jesus was crucified. I mean, the first question I'd ask is, what did he do? I mean, why was he placed on a cross, nails driven into his hands, his wrists, into his feet and ankles? Why did that happen? Why did that painful experience happen? And what made him such a heinous person for that to occur to Jesus? Because there's got to be a backstory. I know there's a backstory, because anytime we talk about Jesus at all, there's always a backstory, and there's something that needs to be told, because I think that the Jesus experience should always be read in this context, that something about being human is being talked about. Something about what it means to be human is being discussed in this story. And so we have to take a look at the backstory. So what did Jesus do? I mean, what made this kind of painful killing, quote, necessary in those days? Well, all he did as outlined in the Gospels is take a look at this system that had been set up. Not only were the Romans treacherous, for it was Roman law that was the law of the day. Not only were they treacherous, but the Jewish people had factions within it that were also treacherous for them. I mean, the temple system had grown incredibly broken. It had become just filled with all sorts of corruption. The people would pay taxes into the system, and the people would give to the temple. And that money, instead of being used for the Jewish people and for the welfare of people that were starving and didn't have homes and didn't have any safety or security, it was being used for the pleasures of the Pharisees and those that were in charge of the temple system. I mean, what it was is a good example of the corruption of the day by the leadership of the Jewish people. I mean, and Jesus was railing against that. I mean, when he came into the temple and he flipped the tables of the money changers and chased all the people that were doing business in the temple, I mean, he was saying that this corruption cannot stand. And when he went out and did the healings of the people that were without the care that they needed, he was saying something. He was saying something that was really interesting and subversive, because what he was saying is that nobody's taking care of these people. They're not being fed. They're not being housed. They're not being clothed. I mean, these are the people that are the heartbeat of the Jewish nation, and they're being abused and used. I mean, taking advantage of the poorest was exactly what was going on then, and he was railing against that. I mean, and it was the people that had. It was the people that had been stealing the monies from the coffers, and who had been subverting all of the things, the financial wherewithal of the Jewish people that were benefiting. And you could look around today and see some of that going on too. I mean, the gulf between the very rich and the very poor is growing. And that's the kind of thing Jesus was speaking to in the day. That's what he was saying when he was going out and having dinner with people. He was being subversive. And you can't do that for very long without drawing the attention, drawing that attention that he drew from not only the Romans, but also from the Jewish people, from the Pharisees. So, I mean, he became public enemy number one because he was pointing out the corruption of those people that were leading the system. And for that, for trying to help people, for trying to be the person that was shouting from the rooftops that something needs to change, and that there's freedom and a way to live out there for everybody if they understand how it is that we must live, which is free in our interiors, free inside, connected with Spirit, connected with God, and move forward with that kind of power. He was faced with real difficult times. So he was crucified. That's the backstory. I mean, he was crucified for being the person that was talking about what was going on rather than allowing it to be the dirty little secret. And so it's a really interesting backstory, which leads some people back in the day when they read those words, Jesus was crucified, to believe that he'd lost, because people that were crucified, they were at the end of the road. They'd lost. They'd been punished in ways that a greater power had utilized to shut him up, and he'd lost. But this is what makes the story so much fun, and this is why I've entitled this talk tonight, "You Haven't Heard the Last Word Yet." The last word has not been spoken, because there is a last word that's spoken. I mean, the resurrection story is about to begin, you see. You see, 3 days later, some really interesting and unique things happen that create a situation where just a man is crucified and loses, to this raising of a brand new consciousness which permeates the entire world. I mean, I wrote a song that says, Jesus became the Christ today. And that's about his last breath up on the cross. Because in that moment, what he did was transition from being a human that could be crucified to an idea that is way beyond crucifixion. So I'm going to play that. And please be aware that the dog may very well join me. Right, Harley? You know the words. God and humankind are one. The lesson of the cross is clear. The end is always the beginning. Plant the seed, release the fear. Jesus became the Christ today. Rejoice in knowing he shows the way. Yeah, Jesus became the Christ today. Rejoice in knowing he showed the way. Sing it, Harley. Jesus became the Christ today. Rejoice in knowing he shows us the way. Yeah, Jesus became Christ today. Rejoice in knowing he shows us the way. Whew. So that's a song of rejoicing. Yay! As Harley and Jackie clap.
Yay! Harley's barking.
So here's what we do sometimes. What we do sometimes when we talk about Easter, that's the day of the resurrection. What we tend to do is sort of forget that this is a transfiguration, a transformation. A real resurrection is all about becoming something absolutely new, something totally different. This is not a resuscitation. This isn't bringing back something that was. This isn't somebody popping up like the Terminator saying, I'm ready to do my job again. Now, this is a total and complete transformation, a total and complete transfiguration, a move from the body, the material self, into the idea realm where things can truly be created. And so we have to be very, very careful when we take a look at what this whole Jesus thing is about. We have to be very careful that we don't just say something like to ourselves or to somebody else that, Jesus showed us how to be lifted up into heaven. No, that's not the meaning of this. This is a true transfiguration, a true transformation. In fact, the Jews would have wondered what this heaven thing was about. They wouldn't have understood that to be something that they were shooting for. They would understand this to be something moving from the realm of the seen into the unseen for purposes that are far greater. I mean, this story is fabulous because, hey, the last word hadn't been heard yet. The last word hadn't been spoken. You see, the Romans and the Pharisees thought that they'd crucified their man. But the truth is, with the resurrection, the last word was in the air. The last word was out there. The last idea had been spoken, one that would catch fire. I mean, really turn into a movement that was beautiful and had roots of Jesus himself. Over the eons, over the years, with many different interpretations of what this story really means, there have been people that have completely lost the entire backstory, what it means to be human, what Jesus was really standing for, what he was trying to bring to us. And, when I say things, when I stand up in front of groups and say, when somebody's hungry, feed them. When somebody needs clothes, get them clothes. When somebody needs a roof over their head, give them a roof over their head. If they need medical care, give them medical care. What I'm really doing is telling the Jesus story. What I'm really doing is telling the story of what Jesus said when he walked the face of this earth. This is why he died, because he wanted that for people. Not because he wanted you to see that you too could be lifted after 3 days in the tomb up to this special place called heaven. He never talked about that. He talked about the resurrection of an idea, the bringing about of something magnificent. We've seen things unfold in really interesting ways. There are some of us that still remember. There are some of us that tell this story in a way that doesn't include Easter egg hunts, which is really all about spring, and I love that. I can tell that story too, about a Savior helping other people to understand how it is that they get into the promised land. I mean, I could tell that story too. But the story that I like to tell is the one that's based on human needs. The story I like to tell is one that is about the human condition. And I think I just told that story. I really feel like we have had some people in just the recent past century that have stepped forward and tried to act in the way that Jesus did, tried to bring forth a nonviolent way of changing things. Martin Luther King stepped into the fray when black people were being mistreated and utilized in ways that just turn your stomach today, and treated in ways that are horrible. And he did it in a nonviolent way. I mean, he didn't face that violence with violence. In South Africa, the same sort of thing happened. There was a nonviolent transition, a turn of events that was brought about through Nelson Mandela's ideas and actions, even while he was in prison. He wasn't even there on the forefront, and he still brought about those changes. This is incredible stuff, very Jesus-y. Yep. Very, very Jesus-y. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we have seen in our time, that are really, truly Christ-like. These are the ideas that have been creative, and Christ-like ideas create in a very Christ-conscious way. So, Yeah. Hey, we've done a Passover story. We've talked about the Good Friday experience, which is central to understanding what it is about Easter that's so important, which is that the last word hadn't been spoken yet, and we've talked about different ideas around Easter. So at this time, what I really want to do is allow some of this stuff to sink in after we do a little shout out for people who are on the Facebook Live. Now, I understand that tonight we have a lot of politicians too, don't we? I mean, the entire Senate was convened for this service. I see the names of each of them. I'm not going to bore you with reading them, but we have Joy and Jack. I'm talking about the senators and
right.
you know, I mean,
Joy
the
and Jack,
entire
go
Congress.
ahead.
Joy and Jack and Harold and Kelly and Peggy and Annabelle, Bobby, RJ and Bonnie, woo woo, Jan, Marion, Cindy, Michelle, Monica, Sherry, Life, you're on board. Pam and Elka and John. And so
That's just a few.
there may be more. I don't know. Maybe more out there. Certainly do me this favor though, because I think that there's real importance to what it is we did tonight, what it is that we had to say tonight, and share it. You know, share this with people who might need to hear it. And that might mean sharing it on your Facebook page, or it might mean just, you know, telling somebody through a text message or an email that they can go to the Sanctuary for Spiritual Living Facebook page and pick up this Wednesday night service. So, yeah, we're open at the top. We're open at the top. So let's do what would be called a closing prayer with, let's see, where did I put my little gonger? There it is. With this as a backdrop. Doesn't that sound good? It's a call to prayer. And so this is what I'm knowing. What I'm knowing is that each of us is fully joined with this power, this presence, this infinite resource that we call God, Spirit, the universe, whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. It's the power behind all that is and all that is. And we are fully joined with that. We are that which God is because we're made of God's stuff. Now, each and every one of us has that Godness within each of us that is the full measure of God. The full measure of God is everywhere all the time. That's the definition of infinite. And so we are filled with that Godness at all times, in all ways. And our job is to become conscious of it. And we did that tonight. And so I know for each of us that we've heard what it is we need to hear, that we've been given a perspective on this Easter story and how it relates to all of the things that are human in nature, our own humanness, where we stand today, what we see today in society, how it is that we can move forward in the most Christ-conscious way possible. And that's the gift that we get when we understand the story, the backdrop, the backstory, the humanness of Jesus, as well as the Godness of Jesus. And so I'm so thankful for this time together. I'm so thankful for each and every person watching and all those that aren't watching. I'm knowing that everyone within my sphere of influence is absolutely taking care of themselves and is absolutely cared for, as we all are. And so it's with that great thanksgiving that I release these words into the law of mind, knowing that they're already done, that God says yes. And please join me by saying,
And
so it is. All right. You too, Harley?
Namaste.
Well, good night, you guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off now. Thank you for being
you next
here in
week.
our magnificent service.
See you next week.
See you next week.